My name is Angela Charles, and I am the Director of Charlotte Water. And I thank you all for coming out on this rainy evening to our public notification meeting. And the public notification is regarding Charlotte Water's potential request to modify our IBT certificate. And IBT is Interbasin transfer. So before I go any further, let me also have our speakers and panelists introduce themselves, beginning with Ron.
Yeah, good evening, Ron Hargrove. I'm one of the deputy directors at Charlotte Water.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Linwood Peel, and I work with the North Carolina Department of Environmental Quality, Division of Water Resources, and I supervise the Water Supply Planning Branch, which oversees one of 13 statewide programs, and Interbasin transfer is one of them.
Hello, good evening. My name is Rob Devlin. I'm the Assistant Bureau Chief for the Bureau of Water in the Department of Environmental Services. That's the new department which was split out from what used to be DHEC. So a lot of you understand DHEC. DHEC's health side and environmental side is split up, and I'm in the Department of Environmental Services. Thank you.
Okay, so thank you, Ron, Linwood, and Rob. Okay, so what is this meeting about? Again, it's to notify the public about our potential request to transfer more water from the Catawba River to the Rocky River in the future. And again, we are here to notify the local community. We are not asking, this is not about how much we are allocated to withdraw. This is about our potential need to increase the amount of water we are allowed to transfer to the Rocky River basin. This is not a hearing. We are here to listen to your comments. Some questions that you have, we may be able to answer, but again, we are here to listen and to record and have a record of all of the comments that we receive this evening. Also, this meeting is being broadcast virtually, so normally we have people online, and this also, and that's also a part of the record that we will be keeping as a part of this process. Okay, so about this request, we're like every other utility. We're always running the analytics and looking at our data. And so the preliminary analysis suggests that up to an additional 30 MGD, which is less than 1% of the flow through the Catawba River, Catawba waterway system, would be needed in the future on a daily basis. Now, North Carolina, this is like a 30-year projection. So utilities who have IBT certificates, as part of our system analysis, we have to look out and project what we may need for the next 30 years. Also, there was modeling of the Catawba waterway system that was developed by Duke Energy in the 2006 FERC relicensing process. And so in that process, demand projections were done through 2058. And so what we're doing here was included as a part of that model. Also, local water supply plans in North Carolina and South Carolina communities were included in the projections, and future growth and potential for IBT increases were forecasted. So all of that was done as a part of the relicensing process, and what we are doing here, which Charlotte Water's potential request is certainly within what was projected back then. Currently, I also wanted to discuss this. Currently, the Catawba Water Management Group is updating the model, and it's going to, again, look at all of the utilities, the uses, the demands, and they're going to update it to 2075. So the key point is what we're doing here is certainly within the model projections that were done back in the relicensing process. Okay. So if you want more information about what I've just talked about, the Catawba Water Management Group, there is a website. What we want you to get from this point here is that you can see all of the different, okay, I went out, am I back in? Okay, you can see all of the different utilities that are part of the Catawba Water Management Group. The thing I also want you to note is that water resources are best managed together and regionally. Water does not flow by geographic boundaries, okay? And so again, we are all managing and we all have to coexist in the same basin. This is a chart that we like, that's a part of what we share in this meeting. And so if you look at the far left here, you'll see 3.7 billion surface and groundwater inflow into our river system. And then you can also see the different uses. So you've got the public water supplies, you've got industrial uses, you've got power, you've got agricultural irrigation. You also have, you can see a natural source evaporation at 204 MGD. And so you can see here water supply, public water supply being 111.6 MGD. And then here going to the water rehydro station outflow, you've got 3.3 billion gallons. Ron Hargrove, again, when he comes up and talks specifically more about Charlotte Water's request, he'll refer to that slide and explain it in more detail. So our agenda this evening, of course, we've done introductions. We're going to have Rob Devlin come up from South Carolina DES. Then Linwood Hill from North Carolina DEQ will talk about the North Carolina process. And then Ron Hargrove, he's one of our deputy directors. He will then discuss and give you more detail about Charlotte Water specific potential requests. And then we'll have comments and questions. And again, everything that you say will be part of the record and is recorded. So Rob, if you want to come on up.
Thank you, Angela. Good evening. Again, I introduced myself. My name is Rob Devlin. I'm the Assistant Bureau Chief for the Bureau of Water, the Department of Environmental Services. I appreciate everybody coming out tonight, and this is a great crowd. I mainly want to be here to let you know that Charlotte is asking potentially to have a surface water interbasin transfer, and South Carolina's part in this is that we have agreements with North Carolina and South Carolina to have certain steps, and this is step one, where the IBT person comes in and asks the area that, or notifies the area that they're looking at increasing their IBT. South Carolina's role in this is to just make sure that We are engaged in that all water that is transferred will not adversely affect anything we do in our state. This process will take at least 3 to 4 years, as you hear from Linwood. It is a very long process, and science will run the process. So at DES, we will be there to help oversee the data that's coming through North Carolina's DEQ, and we'll be able to engage with them and have discussions on behalf of the citizens of South Carolina. I'll be here this afternoon or this evening to answer any questions if you all have any. I just want to let everybody know, DES is in charge of water quantity and water quality for the state as we manage the systems. So our role here is just to work with North Carolina and to make sure that all South Carolina's interests are served as well with Charlotte as they come through their process. With that, again, I'll be here after the meeting, so if anybody has any questions and want to talk to me one-on-one, that would be great. Thank you.
Thank you, Rob. Also, if we have any elected officials, will you please stand? I neglected to do that. So any elected officials, thank you so much. Let's give our elected officials a hand. Everything that we can do an accomplishment takes great political leadership, so thank you for attending.
Good evening again. My name is Linwood Peel, and I'm the supervisor for the Water Supply Planning Branch, which oversees the Interbasin transfer. And tonight, what I want to do, I want to give you a high-level overview of the IBT program and the statutory requirement of the program itself. And first, I want to give you a basic. All right, let me make sure I get the technology right first. All right, let's try it again. Yes, I just want to give you a basic definition of interbasin transfer. I want to we'll go over an overview of the statutory requirements and talk about the IBT process and the statutes that we have to follow. And probably the most important thing for you to know is the decision that the EMC will make and what do they really consider in the process. Okay, a basic definition of interbasin transfer. Withdrawing water from one river basin, using that water and discharging it or consumption in another basin. In North Carolina, and I'm sure in South Carolina, you have surface water transfers. But in interbasin transfer, I'm going to give you a specific definition of how it works in North Carolina as well. And one of the things I started the presentation off on the purpose. The General Assembly in 1993 in North Carolina established interbasin transfer statutes. And at that time, they said the purpose, they want to ensure that it was good public policy to transfer water from one river basin to another. In other words, they said if it caused detrimental harm to one basin over another, it won't happen. So, and since 1993, tell you how, I guess, contentious this has been, there's been over 20 changes to the interbasin transfer law since 1993. And I started in 95, so majority of those changes was during my career there. Okay, statutory thresholds. There's 3 ways that an interbasin transfer or surface water transfer becomes an interbasin transfer. And the first one is if you initiate a transfer of 2 million gallons any one day or a peak day of 3 million gallons. Now we have systems in North Carolina that transfer more than that, but if they were put in before 1993 law, they're considered pre-existing transfer or the term grandfather transfer. So it doesn't have to go through this process. I want you to keep that in mind. And the second, if you increase the amount of your transfer by 25%, that means if you have a pre-existing condition or a certificate and you transfer it by 25%. We haven't had number 2 to happen in the state of North Carolina as of yet. And the third one is for Charlotte falls under. It's increasing an existing transfer of water from one river basin to another river basin that was approved by the EMC. And they have an interbasin transfer, and now they're asking for a modification of that existing interbasin transfer. Next, I want to give you a kind of basic idea of how an interbasin transfer works. This is relatively, elementary sketch, but the concept is the same, and you'll see this concept used in actual technical drawings that Charlotte Water has as well. But a transfer is transfer withdrawal minus the return, and keep in mind it's the net transfer, not the gross. And the first example you have here, example A, is the town, the service area of a town is given or shown in the green circle. And in this case, the total gross that they're pulling out is 10 MGD. But in the source basin side, they're using 2 MGD. But in their service area, that's consumption. That could be through septic tanks, it could be through irrigation, it could be through any type of water that stays in that service area. Then on the other side of the service area, in the receiving basin, there's 3 MGD consumption, but 5 is being discharged to the receiving river or receiving river basin itself. So the IBT in that case, the net would be 8. And example B is the same, a similar example where the town is totally in the receiving basin, and they were drawing 10, but the discharge of 5 back, but the consumption of that town there is 5, so the IBT is 5. Just to give you an example, there are so many different ways, and one of the things I tell people, keep in mind, when towns was established, a lot of them were established on ridge lines. That's why we have systems in North Carolina that has huge surface water transfer, but not require a basin. To give you a great example is the city of Durham. The city of Durham is built, their service areas in the center, was split by the center of the Neuse and the Cape Fear River Basin. They have a pre-existing transfer of over 50 million gallons a day because their system was built in the late 1800s, but over time it just, of course, grew on both sides of their basin. They have a huge pre-existing, so they're not required to get an IBT. And to next, well, give you an example of the actual statutory map that was designed by our General Assembly in 1993, and this map was actually hand sketched by several General Assembly members that I'm sure they're not in the General Assembly this time, but this map is in the Secretary of State office, and this is what North Carolina is required to use based on our statute. And the reason I mention that is because it roughly follows the hydrologic unit codes used by the USGS. And in the coastal areas, some of those lines don't completely line up, but they're most of them are fairly close. And I just want to keep that in mind, just in case someone look at a HUC map and they don't align. That's why the General Assembly established it. But to give you that idea, if you look at the general primary colors there of the large basin, for instance, since we were talking about the Catawba River Basin, the green 3-1 and 3-2, the total green is the major basins. So we have 18 of those. If you look within that green, we have 2, 3-1 and 3-2, which is considered sub-basins. We have 38 of those. The interbasin transfer works for all 38, not just 18. So to transfer from any of those that you're looking at, those lines, when it goes across one line to another line, they're required, if it's not pre-existing condition, to go through the certification process. To kind of give you an overview of North Carolina, and as I said, not all surface water transfers in North Carolina requires an IBT, and I mentioned the city of Durham as one example. But we have currently 130 public water systems that have surface water transfer, but 80% of them are roughly under 1 MGD, so it's a small amount of that system transferring to another river basin. But since 1993, we have only, the Environmental Management Commission, who oversees DEQ's process in this statute, issued 9 IBTs since 1993. And we only had one previous IBT certification modification, and Charlotte Water is asking for the second one. The first one was the town of Cary in Wake County, North Carolina. And as I mentioned earlier about the grandfather allowance for systems, that's why the number is 2MGE, and except if you had pre-existing conditions before 1993, that would be your grandfather allowance. And only a handful of them, maybe I think it's 6 or 7 of them, the last time we calculated was between 1 and 2 MGE, and we monitor them as they get closer and closer before they get a certificate. Okay, and as I mentioned, the 9 that was provided since the statute's been in place, I'm not going to go through the entire table, but kind of give you an idea. Piedmont Triad was 1991, and they went from the Deep River to the Hall and the Yadkin, 30.5 MGE. Charlotte Water, their original IBT that they're modifying in 2002, 33 MGE from the Catawba to the Rocky, and City of Concord, 2007. And they're going from the Catawba Yadkin to the Rocky River, and Greenville Utilities. And during the period of time, another thing I mentioned about, since the 1993 statutes, it's been changed about 20 times over those years. Greenville Utilities, one of the things they had in the Central Coastal Plain area, they had is depleting groundwater. So the legislature made some changes so they can go from groundwater to surface water. They changed the statute during that time. Then coastal, Brunswick County, the same thing happened there. And the town of Cary, the modification occurred in 2015 from the Hall River to the Neuse and the Cape Fear River at that time. And Curl Lake, that's a core project lake, and I mentioned that in one of the things that EMC considered, if it's a reservoir as well. Then Union County, which was recently, 2017, and Henry County, coastal. They went under the coastal rules as well. And to give you another idea of, I mentioned we had 130 systems that transfer water. And in North Carolina, it's required to have a local water supply plan. It's 550 systems. So to give you an idea of the concept, it's 130 out of the 550 systems that are required to do, that has surface water transfer. Okay. Next, the process, the IBT process, where we are at this time. We're in step 1, where the applicant submits the notice of intent to file a request of modification. And in this process, at this time, it's basically, it's required for them to tell the public the intent of what the IBT would be. In several of the meetings we had, a lot of people are wondering why there's not an environmental document. The reason there's not an environmental document is because the intent of the statute is to first let people know that what you're doing. We don't want, well, it's not intended for them to do an environmental document, then come in and tell us what they're going to do. So that's why a lot of people said it was premature to have meetings to discuss things that's not done. That's how the statute. And I'm going to put that out today because I've heard so many people say they should have did the work and do the intent, but that's not the way the statute was set up. I thought it was important to say that. But like I said, we're in step 1, and this is the time for the public meetings. And then once we finish this, the process is that then they start working on the environmental document. Once we get it, there's an iteration process that goes through. The state will review it, then other agencies will review it, then eventually the EMC will take it out. In step 2, the public, have public hearings through an EMC hearing officer, then take all that and go back to the document, and then eventually draft, determine if the draft is adequate, and then the Environmental Management Commission will make a final determination on what to do. And next is what I think is very important for everyone who made comments. Keep in mind that the EMC can grant a petition in whole or in part, or they can just flat out deny it, or they may require mitigation measures to minimize detrimental effects if they see that it's causing any type of harm downstream. And in making that decision, the EMC is required to specifically consider these 9 findings of fact. Points. Hold on, I was marking you. I was following you. The 9 findings of facts. And what I tell people is very important to do is whatever your comment is, make sure that the Environmental Management Commission can lay it in one of these categories, because this is what the statute and the law that was established by the General Assembly have to follow. So first, is the project necessary, reasonable, and proposed on the uses of the transfer? In other words, is there a purpose and need for this water? Second, present and reasonable foreseeable detrimental effects on the source basin. Is it going to cause an effect now or 30 years out if this happens? That's why the General Assembly said it has to be good public policy to ensure that there is not detrimental effect on the source. And the cumulative effect of the source basin, is this transfer, this consumptive use, and looking at their low water supply plan, is it going to cause detrimental harm to that source basin? Present and reasonable foreseeable benefit and detriment to the receiving basin. Is it going to harm the receiving basin by taking water in that basin? The availability of reasonable alternatives of the transfer. They're going to look at all the alternatives and say, is this the best public policy in the process of doing it? The use of impounded storage capacity. Purpose of water storage allocated in the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, and North Carolina has 4 U.S. Army Corps of Engineer reservoirs, and that's a portion of it. Whether the service area of the applicant is within both the source and the receiving basin. The examples I gave you, is all the water is being pulled out of one source basin, put it all in another basin, or is it the system itself is in 2 basins, the source and the receiving basins? And the number 9 is a catch-all, and I'm sure the General Assembly looked at it, that any other factor, circumstances reasonably necessary. To me, that's a catch-all that in case other 8 items, it didn't fall in those categories. And even with the conditions and limitations, I mentioned that EMC could grant it in whole or part, or deny it, or have conditions. And every interbasin transfer have these conditions. They have to submit, based on the statute, they have to submit a water conservation plan. That water conservation plan is how are you going to use that water during times of water conservation, just water efficiency. How will you use that water? Then drought management plan, during times of low flow conditions, how are you going to preserve that source water so it won't impact other people in that basin? And then compliance and monitoring plan. Every IBT is required to provide a monitoring plan, and so the Division of Water Resources can make sure the interbasin transfer is in compliance. And of course, quarterly monitoring reports is when the plans comes in. And also the EMC, keep in mind, the EMC have the ability to reopen, amend, or modify the interbasin transfer. Say, for instance, 5 years from now, they find out that they're really not using the water. The EMC can reopen that certificate and make changes. And of course, one of the things is in all of the interbasin transfer certificates by the EMC, no selling of any transfer water to other systems who are not part of that interbasin transfer. And that's one of the probably biggest questions that we get all the time. And also the EMC may impose additional conditions as necessary if needed. And with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Ms. Charles.
Thank you, Linwood. And next we'll have Ron Hargrove, and he's going to give you some more specific details on Charlotte Water's request or potential request.
Good evening again. So what I'm going to talk about is Charlotte specific about our requests, give you a little information about Charlotte Water. I'm going to cover again what an IBT request, but I'm going to use Charlotte Water's data to kind of mimic the chart Linwood showed you. Why we need an IBT modification now, what's the IBT modification process and schedule, kind of pointing out where we are in the steps required, what alternatives are being considered, and then I'll turn it back over to Angela to finish us out. So Charlotte Water consists mostly of all of Mecklenburg County. We serve all the jurisdictions in the county, including all the towns, as well as the unincorporated areas. We serve, have connections across the county lines to most of the counties surrounding Mecklenburg County. We do serve a portion of Mecklenburg County, about 30% is in the Rocky River Basin. That's the area you see there in the darker colors. We are a large public water and sewer utility serving over 1.1 million in population. We like to promote that we are proactive planners. The IBT request, as Linwood explained, requires folks to look out 30 years as a forecast. So back in the late 1990s, early 2000s, the staff at Charlotte Water at the time were looking at future forecasts on how much water would be needed in that Rocky River service district and projected out a peak day demand of 33 million gallons. And so the initial IBT requests that we received at the time through the MC process, that kind of like Linwood described, granted a 33 million gallon a day certification, and that's on a peak day basis. So the single day that has the most water that's transferred across the ridge line that does not come back to the Catawba is how we're measured. And so, you know, as we approach that going forward, we're looking out at the next 30 years, along with our partnership with the Catawba Water Management Group. We've been partners with that group since it was incorporated back in 2007, and you know, the water supply master plan that was developed originally by Duke Energy, as well as got required in the North Carolina, South Carolina Supreme Court settlement, requires 10-year annual updates. That modeling looks out 50 years. It uses every utility's local water supply plan, which is a 50-year forecast, so Charlotte's numbers are included in all the modeling that's been developed by the Catawba Watery as well as Duke in the past. And I think it's important to note that Charlotte Water, a lot of systems go out and have to do their own models about the river basin that they draw from, as well as the receiving. Charlotte Water's chosen not to do that. We've chosen, since we're a partner of the Catawba Water Management Group, we're using their model as the guide, as the tool that gauges this request by, as well as its impacts to users either upstream or downstream or reservoir specific. So we believe in the partnership. We've been there from the start, and we believe in the philosophy and logic of the Water Management Group, and have chosen to abide by what that model suggests and look at ways to help the overall goal of the Water Management Group, which is to sustain the Catawba River for all its intended uses for the foreseeable future. We also, as a member of the Water Management Group, we are a party and a member of the Drought Monitoring Advisory Committee. So it's required to be a member, but we actively participate in that so that we can, if there's a drought condition in the basin somewhere, whether it be north of us or south of us, if there's a conservation call, we all go into to stages of drought and monitoring so that we can make a similar request to preserve the Catawba River through the drought conditions. So what is an interbasin transfer? Again, similar graphic to what Linwood showed, but this is using Charlotte Water's data. On a typical, these are average day numbers. On a typical average day, Charlotte Water withdraws 117 million gallons per day. Most of that water is consumed and treated and returned back to the Catawba in our system. A portion of that water goes across that ridge line and is either consumed or discharged into the Rocky River Basin. And so a lot of folks are talking about increased withdrawals, but we're here to talk about the transfer amount. Every system, as they grow, will have increased withdrawals from the Catawba River. That will occur just due to population or new industries moving to town. But the amount of water transferred isn't a direct tie to how much water is needed and thus withdrawn. As that part of our system grows, there will be more water needed that will be transferred in the future. And so this is really what our request is about, that amount of water that's being transferred and not returned. So how does it happen in the Charlotte system? As you might imagine, we draw from the Catawba River. We have 2 intakes in a couple of reservoirs. We withdraw that water. It's pumped to one of 3 water treatment plants that we have. We treat it to potable standards. We pump that out to our customers. They use it for their purposes, and then that water is collected through our collection system and is treated at our water resource recovery facilities before it's discharged back into a stream. Sorry for the delay. So in the Charlotte system, again, the same map, but you can see our intakes in Mountain Island Lake and Lake Norman. The blue squares are where we have our water treatment facilities, and then most of our service district is in the Catawba Basin. The orange circles that you see are our water resource recovery facilities. They used to be known as wastewater treatment plants, but we're changing the name of that. And so the 4 of our 5 wastewater treatment plants discharge into a stream that leads back to the Catawba. So the water that's either consumed or discharged is not a transfer. The water that gets moved across the basin into these areas, shown by the blue arrows, is the water that's being transferred across, potable water. We do have a facility on the county edge there that is a water resource recovery facility that treats the wastewater and discharges it into Mallard Creek, which is in the Rocky River Basin, as well as we have a contract with the Water and Sewer Authority of Cabarrus County that collects wastewater flows and treats it at their regional facility in Cabarrus County. So why is an IBT modification now? Oops. Okay, so this is some trend charts from our data for IBT. The blue trend charts is our actual peak days that have occurred since 2005. And you see we've had some peaks here recently that got us up close to that red dash line, which is the 33 million gallon a day limit. In 2022, we hit 28 million of the 33. And so that got us to thinking about, you know, we exceeded 80% of our certification limit. In the utility business, once you hit 80% of your capacity, you better start making a plan for the future. Usually when you get over 90% is when you have to enact whatever that plan yields. And so we've taken that approach. In 2023, we were at 26 million gallons a day, so we're at 79% of that limit. But we expect with growth and demands as they occur, even though more people are moving to Charlotte, they are using less water. It's just more people are moving to Charlotte, and wherever they choose to live could require us to exceed our current certification amount in the 2028-2030 range. So what is the process and schedule that we're following? Our process is at least one of 12 major steps. We're on step 2. Back in February, we sent a notice to DEQ and the EMC that we intended to follow this process. A modification process of our IBT certificate, and we're on step 2 of noticing the public. This is the 7th of 7 meetings that we've held since early May to make sure folks were aware, either in their source basin all along the Catawba from Morganton all the way down to Camden, as well as in the receiving basin. And we've had 2 meetings over there, one in Albemarle and one in Florence. And so we, after today, we're going to accept public comments through August 30th. And then we'll go into an extended engagement process with stakeholders. We want that process to be meaningful. We want stakeholders to be able to help us shape alternatives that will be evaluated. We have to produce an environmental impact statement, environmental document that looks at, the request, compares it to alternatives, and determines any impacts, whether they be secondary or cumulative, and what mitigation factors that will have to be considered. Once that environmental work is completed, we'll hand it off to folks like Linwood at North Carolina DEQ. They will develop the environmental impact statement and then hand it off to the EMC. We've asked, it's a voluntary step, but we've asked for the EMC to determine the adequacy of our environmental impact statement. We want, if that's going to be the gauge about Charlotte's request, we want the EMC to consider it, determine whether it's adequate or not, hold a public hearing, and then make a determination of its adequacy. If they do that, we will then have, at the point of asking for a specific request by Charlotte Water right here. So far, the numbers that you may have heard either through the media or in the information exchange has been talking about numbers, but we haven't made an official request. We've indicated what our trends are. It could be up to 30 additional million gallons. It could be something less. I think the state folks will tell you those numbers always change from what was initially discussed. Once we've made our official request, the EMC has it completely. They'll have a draft determination about the requests that they receive. There will be a final public hearing that they hold. And then based upon public comments, they'll have to make a decision whether they deny it, whether they want more information, or whether they approve an increase. The schedule for this process is laid out here. This is totally a draft schedule. The only thing we know for sure is we're in this phase right here with the notice of intent that was sent in February, and then the stakeholder engagement workshops. We expect to announce those coming up in September, at least announce when they're going to start happening. We're working with the consultant to get those stakeholder workshops kind of better identified and develop the stakeholder interests that need to help us through the process. Once that process, however long the engagement process takes, we then will go into a technical analysis and review with a third-party engineer who will develop all the alternatives, analysis, mitigating any impacts that need to be dealt with. And then we'll turn that over to DEQ. The areas where the public can engage are currently now. There, and there. So those are 3 steps the public can officially make comments to both Charlotte Water as we're giving these information meetings, or to the state process and the EMC directly in the public hearings that will be held. Okay, through this process, we had to notify a whole list of folks. The folks that you see in the Catawba Basin there in orange, all the counties that represent that the Catawba is in a portion of their county have been noticed, and also folks in the receiving basin, both in North and South Carolina. I think it's over 340 different entities were noticed. We noticed folks like governing bodies, in each county, public water supply systems, IBT certificate holders, the folks that were on the notification list for the settlement agreement, and then other identified stakeholders, NGOs, nonprofits, tribal nations, et cetera, industries. So in order to begin this process, we did have to look at a few alternatives just to gauge whether we needed to pursue a modification request. These are very concept levels. We spent really 0% engineering to get us to a basic idea of the scale of some of these projects. Some of the things we looked at were pumping wastewater back into the Catawba Basin, so collecting the wastewater in that Rocky River area and somehow getting it back into the Catawba, either pumping it to one of our other treatment plants to be treated, or pumping it or treating it at Mallard, but pumping the effluent to a creek that the headwaters was into the Catawba Basin. We looked at water reuse options, both potable and non-potable. One consideration was, could we take the effluent of Mallard and actually treat it to potable standards and use that as drinking water for the service area. That's not permittable by the state statutes currently in North Carolina, and so that would be a hurdle to using that strategy. We also looked at how could we expand our reuse water, which is treated effluent. It's treated to a higher standard, but it's used for non-potable uses, things like irrigation or water for cooling needs in big box type buildings. So we looked at how we could expand some of our system and have a kind of a plan for how we would do that. We looked at, could we do the Union County example and tap the Yadkin somewhere and bring water in from the Yadkin, build a treatment facility, distribute that to our customers in eastern Mecklenburg County. That also requires an IBT because the Yadkin to the Rocky River is still a transfer. And then we looked at obviously increasing IBT through modification. The things that have to be considered are capital costs, schedule, O&M costs, benefits and risk, environmental factors. Is it even feasible to construct some of these alternatives? So what we're looking for through our stakeholder engagement process is looking for actionable alternatives that can be considered, as well as allow us to help further refine the EIS by determining impacts that we should consider along the way. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Angela to finish this out.
Thank you, Ron. Okay, so how can you participate and comment further in the process? And Ron has talked about some of this. Let's see if we can, okay, it went right over. Okay, first thing you can do is attend a public meeting, which is what you all are doing this evening, and thank you again for coming, considering the weather. You can visit charlottewateribt.org. That is the repository for everything. So if you want to look at previous videos of public notification meetings, they are there. If you want a copy of this presentation, Go to charlottewateribt.org. If you want to see comments from any of our previous 6 meetings, they are at charlottewateribt.org. So the whole objective here is to be transparent, but to also have one place, no matter where you are, if you have the internet or Wi-Fi, whatever, you go to charlottewateribt.org, you'll have the latest information and comments, presentations, video of this meeting will also be posted there. It's just one place we all can go to. You can also email comments to ibtproject@charlottenc.gov. So we have someone on staff who is also monitoring this email address. So we've gotten many comments. We've had members of the public who got home, went home and said, hey, I forgot to ask a certain question, or I just want to send in a comment. You can email it to ibtproject@charlottenc.gov. We'll have it, it'll be part of the record. If there are any resolutions that anyone would like for the utility to have as part of this repository, again, you can email ibtproject@charlottenc.gov, and then we take that and put it on charlottewateribt.org. You can also comment on the draft EIS during the public hearing for determination of the adequacy by the EMC. So the EMC will have a hearing on the draft EIS. You can also comment there as a member of the public. You can, again, there's another opportunity to comment during the EMC Commission hearing on the draft IBT determination. So again, now we're talking about, some of these hearings will be years down the road. This is a multi-year process, but there is an opportunity again to comment straight to the EMC on the draft IBT determination. And then as Ron talked earlier, you can also participate in a stakeholder engagement workshop. And if you are interested in being a part of those workshops, you can reach us at the address at the IBT project at charlottenc.gov email and let us know that. Just a little bit about our workshops. Again, to repeat what Ron stated, we want meaningful stakeholder engagement that will help us identify actionable alternatives to modifying the IBT and also provide input within the scope of the EIS. And so we are looking for stakeholders to represent key and diverse interests, and the stakeholders will have the ability to help shape the alternatives that will be considered. And so logistically, we are planning those now. We have a consultant, third-party facilitator on board, someone who has, experience in facilitating these types of workshops. There will be multiple workshops. We've gotten quite a bit of interest into what we're trying to do here, so of course, we want to accommodate that. And the meetings will be in person and virtually. When you look at the map that Ron showed, that showed a source and receiving basins, there's a lot of different counties. We cross 2 states, a lot of different jurisdictions. And so, again, we want to have that virtual option available because driving just may not be practical. Also, as a member of the public, you don't have to attend or be in the workshop, but you can still view it. So in other words, we're going to have it such that the workshops are broadcast virtually. So just like this meeting here, we've got people in other locations who are viewing this meeting. If you just want to chime in and look and get on virtually and view one of the workshops, that's our plan. We want to have the public also view the workshops as they are occurring. Okay, so this is our 7th and last public notification meeting, just to give you a feel for where we've been. We started in Hickory, then we did Charlotte, Albemarle, Camden, Florence. We went back, we did Morganton, the Hickory-Morganton area, and then Rock Hill. Tonight, you all are our last public notification meeting. Okay, so now we are going to be open for questions and/or comments. We're going to ask everyone if you have a question or a comment, just to come to the mic here. Again, this is about our potential request to transfer from the Catawba to the Rocky River Basin, and again, we are very early in a multi-stage process. So, got any questions or comments? You can come on up, and we've got the panelists here. You can answer. Oh, it's on. Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much. I am Gwen Savage. I am a third-generation native of Fort Mill. I live very close to the Catawba River. I spent 25 years working for Duke Power in communications, so I was actually at Duke when those relicensing plans were drafted, and I totally understand forecasting is not permission nor promise. It is simply forecasting. So I thought it would be important to say during 2000 to 2002, this area experienced 155 weeks of drought. During that period of time, when I worked for Duke, I actually sat in a flatbed boat in Lake Wiley with CNN News as we talked about the drought. We were only hours away from industries along the Catawba in this region having to shut down. So I do understand the necessity. You can live without electricity, you can live without a lot of things, but you can't live without water. I do think it will be impossible for me to support. I don't know why we had the first interbasin transfer, because the actual run of the river belongs to the people. The impoundments along the run of the river built by Duke are considered fuel, but the run of the river itself is not. It is for the people. So when that water is reduced, and even though I'm reading carefully, it says this is not a request to withdraw more water. You can't release it to another basin if you don't withdraw it from one. So I cannot see supporting additional withdrawals from a water source that is to serve this area. My friends in Chester, they want more industry and they're building it. Less water, drought conditions, that would be a problem for them. Any water purveyor along the way, Fort Mill water comes from Rock Hill. We don't want less water in that system. So I do think, while I have a heart for growth, because Fort Mill itself has been the nation's leading area for growth, and we struggle with how to say no to that. When I go to our transportation meetings, they say, you need to shut that down. So I get it, I understand, but we must find better ways of managing what growth and how it affects the infrastructure, rather than taking from those that would be downstream and not have the same flow of water. So I thank you for your time here, but I'm afraid we'll be together for the next 3 years or so. So thanks so much.
Thank you so much.
I'm Ralph Norman. I represent the 5th District in South Carolina. I want to thank each of you for taking the time to come. I just want to echo some of what Mayor Savage's comments made. Water is the linchpin, as you all know, for not only growth, but really livability. And I guess my question is, can we get information that, like the 30-year plan, I assume that's for North Carolina, correct? Who's representing South Carolina? If do we get a plan for, I mean, is it up to South Carolina to come up with their projections and to submit?
Yeah, so this is Rob Devlin with the Bureau of Water, DES, if I don't get that right yet. So we do have a planning program, and currently the Catawba Water Management Group is going to be acting as our state water planning group along with DES. And am I right here, Joe, starting in the next couple months, we should be getting some information from the plan. The plan is already being worked on. This is a bi-state plan, so it covers both states. We're very excited about that because I've been telling people that I believe that we should be managing the resource as a basin and not at a state line. That being said, South Carolina has its interest too. We're at the bottom, so we will be evaluating that and making sure that the water that is coming through is what we need to support our growth and our water supply down the road. We were working very diligently with Duke on the FERC licensing to make sure that I believe the original number was 150 CFS, got up to 700 after that drought because that was not enough water, and we realized that back in '02. So we've got a lot of expertise in the area, and we will continue to work very hard to make sure South Carolina's interests are done on the water planning aspect of it. And we've got a lot of planning activities that we need to do as well.
Okay. Can we get copies of, like, I think if, a friend just called me, I didn't know anything about this, and luckily I was in town. You'd fill 4 of these auditoriums up or more. This is a huge deal for North Carolina, but for South Carolina as well. Could I get a list of the people that were invited here and the plan and anything else, the commissioners that we're dealing with? I'm kind of like Mayor Savage, we're probably going to be on opposite ends of the scale with this, but as far as the support. But again, thank y'all for doing this, and I appreciate the presentation.
Absolutely, thank you.
Hi, I'm Lisa Cook, and I'm in Fort Mill County Council as well. And I just wanted to ask a question. Our town most recently had our largest investment in our wastewater treatment plant, being good stewards of the water that's going back into the system. I'd like to understand what Charlotte Water has been doing over the last 30 years to improve the processes of the water that's being discharged back. Because we often hear in the news about no swim areas and the concern there. And I want to be sure that the recreation side of the water that's coming down and the water we're pulling is a safe water for us as well.
Ron, you want to talk about plant
Sure.
upgrades and improvements?
Sure, thank you for your question. Over the last 30 years, every, let's call them wastewater treatment plants, that's what they've always been called, has undergone an upgrade, a modernization. Back in the early 2000s, due to the nutrient issue in the lower reservoirs, Charlotte went through a phosphorus limitation in its permits. And so all the plants were improved to reduce that nutrient loading so that it would reduce any impacts from that, algae and other things. The Lake Wiley, for example, went through a TMDL process. I don't know if that term means anything to you, but it limits the amount of nutrients that the lake can assimilate. And so all the plants that discharged into Lake Wiley, which Charlotte did not have at the time, were limited by how much nutrients that they could discharge into the water body. Charlotte, again, we do planning. We look out for a long time. We realized that we needed to build a facility on the western side of the county. And so we worked with the town, the city of Belmont, the city of Mount Holly, and we've made agreements to build a new regional facility that will take their 2 plants offline, and it will be treated and discharged into Lake Wiley from the Charlotte facility. To us, that's good news. Not only will the water be cleaner going into Lake Wiley, it will be more water. Right now, that water is pumped and is collected and conveyed 27 miles from the North Lake Mall area of Mecklenburg County all the way to Pineville to be treated. And so through our new Stowe Regional Facility, there'll be, the day that plant opens, there'll be additional 5 million gallons of water being discharged into Lake Wylie than occurs today. So we've made improvements at all the facilities for both the quality of our effluent. Our plants win awards for their plant permit compliance. We do on occasion have episodes in our collection system. Very rarely do we have issues at our treatment facilities. Some of the issues you hear about no swim advisories are due to damage to collection lines in neighborhoods, that some of that wastewater does get into the reservoirs. And so, you know, the Mecklenburg County Stormwater goes and they take a very cautious approach until the water is tested and proved that it's below limits. They issue a no swim advisory as soon as one of those discharges occur.
Also, some of those aren't ours, they are private pump stations and lift stations on the lake. And so when it says no swim advisory, there's an automatic assumption that it's a Charlotte water issue, and often it's not.
And the other thing I'll say, our greatest resource is our people. You know, we invest in our treatment facilities so that they can do the best job they can, but the people running them take pride in their job to make sure that they put the cleanest water back in the creek.
All of our awards and also treatment data and effluent data is online at charlottewater.org. There's also an annual wastewater report that utilities have to send out to their customer base, and you'll find that we're one of the best in the nation in terms of quality of effluent that's put in the river.
Good evening. Thank you all for being here. I'm representing Brandon Liggett, and I represent the eastern side of York County and Chester County, from the Catawba Indian Reservation Nation to Great Falls. So I can't even calculate the number of miles of river frontage, but it's a lot. We appreciate y'all being here. And as the mayor said, Chester County is definitely looking at growing, and we've got growth issues every day, and we've got water issues. And we've got water in both sides, clean water and how we're going to handle the waste. So those are big issues. I want you to continue to work on those. And I just want to remind you of who's involved. I mean, we've got the whole Catawba Basin of the nation, the Catawba Indian Nation. Is anybody here from the nation? No. I was going to say, like Congressman Norman, I heard about this an hour ago. And I just stopped with what I was doing and came on. So the nation is not represented, so I guess I'm representing them as their representative. And I can tell you, they are a sovereign nation. You're not going to take their water and something that they're named after, the river's named after the Catawba Indian Nation, and not talk to them about it, and make that a key part of your plans. You know, I don't know if the folks of Charlotte realize, but you know, we've got the Catawba Land Trust, the Nations Ford Land Trust, the Greenway, all coming down the river, and we're going on down the river to the Lansford Canal. We've got a state park in Lansford Canal. We are working on a second state park in Great Falls. We've got a whitewater park, which Duke Power spent millions and millions over budget, I think, you know, to get that done, and we're proud of it, glad to have it, and invite Charlotte folks down every day to be in our whitewater park down there, which is run with real water and not in cement trough. You know, we're running real river rapids, and of course you got the Fishing Creek Reservoir, and that all goes into the watery, which I appreciate the fact that you went down to Camden, and I assume you had good attendance down there. I hope you did. But as Congressman Norman said too, we fill this room up 10 times over with, if folks had known about it. I heard about it an hour ago, and I'm an elected official. Not that that makes me special, but I'd have thought I'd have been on a mailing list, and maybe I was. I mean, I get a lot of mail every day. I admit that. But anyway, so I just want to say, be conscientious of how big and how much impact this is going to have on folks who make their living on the river. And I know they do in North Carolina too, and I appreciate that. But as it starts to run out on our end, we can't afford to let it run out. It's got to keep flowing. Thank you for coming. Appreciate you bringing this information to us, and hopefully we can get a little better communication. And appreciate the South Carolina DHEC folks here, and Rob. Make sure we get a call next go around. Thanks a lot. Y'all have a good evening.
Thank you, sir.
My name is Billy Hagner. Just want to more reinforce what Mayor Savage said, and also what Randy said. I have been in the area since the early 1980s. I have been affected by low river flow. Savage noted the drought we had in 2002. We also had some, maybe not quite as bad, but they were very severe in 2007 and 2008. Greatly affected the river flow. Normal river flow in the Colorado, somewhere around, work down in the south of the dam, somewhere around 2,700 CFS. During these time frames, we get months where it got down to 900 or 800 CFS rain. So that's extremely low. And that would be an average for the day. So because sometimes we can get lower, a lot lower than that. That's a great impact. As the area is growing, just not only in Charlotte and down in South Carolina, there'll be more water drawn out of the river, even going on up to the Hickory area. You know, they're going to be drawing more water, so river flow is going to just, if we don't do anything, y'all won't transfer, and it's still going to be going down. We have to really look at, what is going to be the impact of all the people in the industry downstream. And one other just quick question. I know this may not be sure it's been asked, but I didn't hear anybody say anything. Why can't you get water out of the Rocky River? I don't even know what side that river is. Is that not an option at all?
It's a very small, I would call it a creek. Rather than a river, even though it's named a river. I'm sure there's probably a technical term that determines one's a river and one's a creek, but it's really not adequate for a potable water source. So the Yadkin being a very large basin, it would be more reasonable to go that far to tap it.
One other thing, again, I do encourage you to get up there to look at reusing the water where it can be done. Usage would be used. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you for the presentation and for everyone attending tonight. My name is Brandon Jones, and I'm the current Catawba River Keeper. Our organization is a nonprofit which seeks to protect, preserve, and restore the entire Catawba River Basin. Right now, I represent over 6,000 active members who are concerned about the proposed expansion of Charlotte's IBT and similar future requests from municipalities across the basin. 23 years ago, the first Catawba River Keeper, Don Linsky, spoke in a very similar forum as Charlotte requested to expand its legacy IBT commitment, 16.9 to the current 33 million gallons per day. She also spoke out in the 2006 Interbasin request from Concord and Indianapolis. Then in 2010, we were once again advocating during the South Carolina versus North Carolina Supreme Court case. 11 years ago, we commented on the proposed amendments to Charlotte's permit to extend it to the Grease Peak watershed. It's my lofty goal to be the last Catawba River keeper involved in this kind of challenge. I don't plan on being here in 30 years, so we can make this happen. Our position is that it's not sustainable and frankly irresponsible to simply allocate more of the Catawba water to other basins. While we may have an abundance in some years, it's finite resources, and there's a rapidly developing area that cannot be overallocated. We are advocating in Charlotte take this opportunity to lead the region to the next phase of water conservation and mitigation. We need a new system that better captures the value of our surface waters for current and future generations. While we are still meeting with experts and stakeholders to develop our full recommendations for the August 30th deadline, there are many ways to decrease the demand of transfers and increase the available supply. The alternatives analysis, for example, should be required in incentivizing water conservation, including high-efficiency fixtures, gray water systems, as has been mentioned, non-potable reefs. In addition to Charlotte's 2002 Interbasin transfer was a stakeholder group, which created their post-construction stormwater ordinance. That ordinance has been a model for others around this region. A similar group could be created to implement effective water conservation measures. It might not be feasible or desirable to create a new reservoir in the Rocky River. Charlotte could offset that demand by increasing the water supply in the rest of the Catawba. One solution is to establish a fund that all future interbasin transfers will pay into. That fund could be used for source water protection, groundwater recharge, loss prevention, restoration, etc. Each such fund already exists in the Catawba Water Management Group. Finally, we recommend reassessing the impacts of federally endangered Carolina gills fluke. Many of the recommendations, both by federal and state biologists, now adopted during the last permit, should be reconsidered given the new data that's come out in the last decade. Thank you for your time and attention. We're looking forward to being part of a sustainable solution.
Thank you, Brandon.
Brandon, would you provide those comments to us?
It's going to be long.
Yeah, that's good. Thank you.
Do we have any other comments or questions? Sure.
My name is Jerry Ramirez. I live in TK. Been down from up north in 1974 and been on the river that whole time. Just a couple of comments for your presentation. I really would like you guys to start with what is the water requirements for Charlotte over your study plan. If you concentrated on the transfer, I'd really like to see what you're doing overall. Okay? And how is the surrounding counties, what is their goal? So in other words, what is the overall demand on the Catawba River Basin? And lastly, I would like to understand, what is the driver for transferring water? Why don't you use it and put it back? I mean, there was probably some reason a while back, but it's probably economic, it's probably this or that, but to me, it sounds like one of these things like taxes. You know, once it happens, it never goes away. And people just start using more and more. You should have a default that says, if you use the water on that river basin, we're going to put it back. Makes it real simple. It's the use of the people that have that basin, it's theirs, that's what it's for. The Rocky River Basin, sorry it's a creek, but I mean, that's kind of what it is, that's what they've done. So, and I don't like that you guys are going to keep moving stuff around and not really having this understanding of the overall. So if you could do that, I'd really appreciate it.
Thank you, sir. Okay. Any other questions or comments this evening? Yes, sir.
Can I ask from here?
Sure.
Reservoirs, additional lakes along the Catawba River, any plans, or is it possible that more of our water can be held back rather than going to the ocean?
That's a very difficult question. And one of the reasons is to build a reservoir now in North Carolina would take a lot of environmental stewardship, I would say. Maybe the riverkeeper will probably have a better idea than we have, but the last reservoir that was built in North Carolina, I heard numbers of decades. That was the largest one was Piedmont, Trad, Ramsey project, the Piedmont Trad project. And my understanding, it started in the 1950s and it was completed, correct me if I'm wrong, around 2010. Maybe the riverkeeper could give you a great idea of the environmental concerns of building reservoir.
Okay, thank you, sir, for the question.
I have a question as well.
Yes, sir.
Question, when did Charlotte acquire their IBT permit? What year was that?
The current certificate was issued in 2002.
2002. So we're looking at a little over 20 years. You all didn't have the foresight to see that this problem would occur one day and figure out ways to transfer it back to the Catawba River? I mean, to discharge it back into the Catawba River instead of continuing to transfer it out?
That's probably a two-part question. The first part is every IBT is required by statute to look 30 years out. And in 2002, Charlotte was required, but it started before 2002, more like 1998. But in 2002, it went to 2032. And when you get 80% of your allocated amount of the 33 MGD, you have to start the process. And by the time they get to 90, the process has to be in place. So that's where the timing is. That's the first question. And part of the environmental document, and it would help with the riverkeeper, Mr. I think Hagler and others, is that in the environmental impact statement process, you have to do all the alternatives. And one or two of the alternatives is to look at the practicability, the cost, and everything of sending water back from the Rocky. And it could be a situation where you have to build a new wastewater treatment plant and then treat it and send it all the way back. You know, they have to look at those avenues as well. That's part of the alternative analysis of the environmental document. That's why at the other meetings, people were saying, well, shouldn't that have been done? No, that wasn't the intent in the General Assembly. The notice of intent is just the scoping process like we're doing now. But everybody wants the answer today, and that's not the way the statute is written.
Is this decision the least amount of cost?
Not always.
I'm from the city of Rockville. We're spending $300 million to upgrade our wastewater treatment plant.
Yes.
And we're not passing that on to all of the customers. We're passing it on to the new customers that plant will service.
And the part of the cost, we'll see that when they're doing the alternative analysis. We have to look at all the costs. And you're right, most of these projects, alternatives, can start at $300 to $500 million. I've seen alternatives with the city of Raleigh, since they haven't done this, but the city of Raleigh had alternatives that was $1 billion per alternative.
One more question. Do you anticipate lawsuits that are going to come to help minimize this? Because I'm sure there's going to be some lawsuits at some point.
In a positive way, we haven't had an IBT in the last 4 or 5 IBT that didn't have a lawsuit. We have several that on the first public meeting was issued that it would be some lawsuit. And I think some of that comes from North Carolina doesn't have a water withdrawal permitting program like other states. Our IBT is probably our only water quantity statute, and I think that's why you hear about all the lawsuits. So to answer your question, simply yes.
Thank you, sir. Any other comments or questions?
What is the plan when you hit 90% if this hasn't been resolved yet?
Go ahead, take that.
Well, we hope to be at least implementing something. We hope to know where we are in the process. You know, there are statutory and regulatory ways, strategies to apply if we exceed our IBT certification. And then I don't know if you want to talk about it, but I would assume it would include moratoriums and things like that that prevent us from exceeding our current certificate. But we are in the study phase right now to determine. I mean, we're just at 80%. We want to be good stewards of the resource, just like every other utility, every other community, and we want to be mindful about ways and strategies that we can mitigate what this potential request would be. We've talked about a lot of the supply side alternatives, but the demand side alternatives, things that Brandon mentioned, conservation, reuse, those types of issues we need to factor into the whole equation. Does that offset an IBT request in the future? I don't know. We think that it could mitigate some of it. I think that's pretty reasonable to assume it could mitigate whatever the request is. Would that service for the next 30 years? We're not sure. And so we're relying on the Catawba Water Supply Master Plan. We call it the Integrated Resource Plan, Water Resource Plan. And so it's going to look out 50 years. And it looks at all the communities from the very top headwaters of the Catawba all the way to where it discharges and combines with the Congaree. And so we're looking at all the utility uses, the power uses, and then we're using that model to help figure out strategies as a water management group as a whole, beyond Charlotte, how we can get each reservoir to, even during drought conditions with increased temperature, to maintain their critical reservoir elevations through droughts. And so there's going to be strategies developed that are beyond Charlotte Water that are going to be probably calling for some of the same things that Charlotte Water is going to be looking at through our IBT requests.
We think that the Catawba long-range study will be completed.
We're in year 4 of 5 currently. The model has been updated by the consultant. We're in the scenario runs right now. It considers temperature increases. It's looking out through 2075. It takes into account every utility's 50-year water supply demand needs. And sometime in the next 6 months, I would like to venture a guess. We'll be seeing what those scenario runs results are and can see what those forecasts do predict.
I think you had a question.
Y'all hear something knocking, it's my knees, okay? I want to ask this question. With the growth, and growth is good, so I'm told. Is there any plans to curtail or do something about the number? I'd say the number of folks that are moving in, but the folks that are tapping our water system, not just by municipalities, but through building permits and things like that. And if you're a developer, I'm sorry, I don't mean to stir anything, but I just want to be sure that and there's enough water to go around when we need it.
Charlotte Water is the service provider. The Charlotte planning department does the planning and the forecast for how the Charlotte area community grows. And so we are at the table, and they know where our limitations are. With Charlotte, there's a densification process in the growth trends currently. The light rail has encouraged, a good amount of additional growth. The fortunate part of that growth, it's lower per capita demand. But there's a lot of people moving to Charlotte. And so, the uses are changing. We study that. We have a water distribution master plan. We update about every 10 years, 8 to 10 years. And so we look at those trends and how we need to stay ahead of the curve on where growth is developing. But we're relying on the planning folks to dictate the type of growth that occurs in the community. It's not a decision that we make. Some utilities have that decision-making power. Charlotte Water does not.
How about building, municipalities do you hear you talk about? I know in the past, there have been times where we have had moratoriums on building permits to slow it down and pick it back up. Is that anything that's?
It's not a Charlotte Water decision that
Okay.
would influence that.
But you don't talk with the building codes, folks?
We converse with building codes folks. We do converse with them, but as far as a call due to growth-related issues is not a Charlotte Water decision.
And I don't mean to be bad, I appreciate you coming out tonight. I live in a place on Lake Island where, 2 or 3 feet of water, if it's down that far for me, I'm in the mud. There's a lot of other folks here tonight that live on the lake or close to the lake, and you drive across the lake to get to work every day. I had a chance to go to Las Vegas last year, didn't make any money out there, but I did see Lake Mead. And Lake Mead is a heartbreaking example of what something looks like when the water runs out. And I just don't want our lake here, our lake system, to end up like a Lake Mead. Please be responsible with our water. Okay. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir, for those comments, and we agree about responsibility. Any other, sir? Any other comments or questions? Rock Hill, are we good?
Okay.
We okay? All right. Okay, we're okay. All right, well, thank you all for attending tonight, and everyone have a great evening. Meeting is adjourned.